stay hydrated out there. Welcome back, everyone, to BlizzCon 2019. Just taking a little bit of water break as we head into the lower bracket for day number 1, where the players are thirsty for victory. Nobody here has a win. It's win or go home. What's going to happen as we enter Group A's lower bracket match between PNC and Casie. Let's not wait anymore. Let's go ahead and introduce our players for our 7th match of today. The first, he is the first ever Latin American representative. He is the #1 winner of Grandmasters America in Season 1. Please welcome to the stage, PNC. And his opponent from Europe, representing Team Complexities, one of the most consistent players in Hearthstone history. Please welcome Casie! It's do or die, gentlemen. Shake hands. And the fate is left to the cards. Let's send it over our casters and get our first elimination match underway.
And Dan has immediately run off stage to go to the bathroom after that intro. My name is Sotul, joined here by Sayan. We do have the serious matter of an elimination game at hand here. For the first time today, for the first time in this event, you are going to see one of these players go home. Not literally, they won't get ejected from the building. They do get to still enjoy BlizzCon, but their tournament life is on the line here. The winner will go through to tomorrow to play the decider match against the loser of the winner's match, but this is tournament life on the line now for these two players. Sayan, what do you make of the series?
I think overall today we've kind of seen a lot of upsets. I've seen the Chinese players, Lee and Lion, both making it through from winner's side. They definitely look strong, looking like they're comfortable on stage. But we've also seen Casie slip up a little bit. He had a full board, given the Rogue the opportunity to lethal damage with the Leroy Jenkins. We've seen a little bit of a slip up from Tom as well. I mean, these are veteran players. Casey's been known for his consistency throughout. And I even saw like Casie tweet out a little bit that he was disappointed himself. And I think he's just taking a little bit hard on himself, but he is expecting the best because he wants to make it to the very finals there.
Yeah, absolutely. You can see here PNC, as Dan mentioned, the first ever representative for the Latin American region here on a global stage. See a few facts for him there. Top 8 at a 2016 America's Championship, as well as the Season 1 winner of Hearthstone Grandmasters. You can see he certainly has some support in the audience. But for this man here, you use the word consistency. Frodan used the word consistency, and it's absolutely the word. Previous year, no one had more top 16 finishes in tour stop events than Casie did. He was there or thereabouts in just about every single event he attended. The Grandmasters program came in, really rewarded that consistency. You heard from him in our break there, the interview we had with Casie, where he said just being a part of Grandmasters for a region that's as competitive as Europe, he already considers that a success. And I think that goes to show that he understands just the level of consistency that he's put in is a fantastic achievement.
Absolutely, and I think at some point in 2018, Casie even started joking around. At the end of the tournament, he would say another top 16 because you make it there and then fall just a little bit short.
Yes.
And here he is again facing off in the elimination match. Going into this matchup, PNC versus Casie, I do believe Casie has a little bit of an edge in the match. PNC's OTK Paladin will not have very many good matchups, and going through their pick ban, it seems like both of them have not decided to protect Shaman, so that's breath of fresh air for all of us here. Instead, PNC is shielding Priest, and Casie is shielding his Warrior. So definitely a turn of events here.
Yeah, this is a really interesting build of Warrior here as well, and a pretty interesting build of Druid. You can see that a little Protect bubble, little Divine Shield bubble is the protected class from the two players. You can see here, this is Casey's build of N'Zoth Control Warrior. So the N'Zoth package is in there as you would expect, being the Kartuk Defenders and N'Zoth itself. But Hakar is a card that we really saw kind of run roughshod over at Masters Tour Bucharest, where it was the card. It was the talking point of just about every matchup as we got to the top 8. And I think it's going to have a really big impact in this series as well, because this is the opening matchup of the series. It's the Warrior versus this Druid that you're seeing here from PNC.
Yeah, brace yourselves, folks, because this Druid is meant to go infinite with the Baleful Banker and the Elise combo. And in order to stop that, Casie does have the Hakar inclusion, and it's going to directly block PNC's ability to pull off the Elise combo by shuffling duplicates of Bloods into the remaining deck for PNC.
Why don't you explain for the uninitiated exactly how the Baleful Banker combo works at base level?
Sure, so the Elise copies the cards in hand, then the Baleful Banker shuffles the Elise back into the deck. But in order for Elise to copy the cards, the deck must have only one of. So as soon as the Bloods come out and the Bloods get shuffled into the deck, they're going to start duplicating, in turn shutting off the one of effects from Elise and Zephyrus.
We did have a chance to have a quick chat with Casie backstage just before we came out for this, talk to him about some of his feelings on the matchup, and he said he didn't feel that bad in it, you know, because he has the Hakar build and because he plays Emperor, he feels like he has a lot of game. And one of the cards that you see him mulliganing away, a Mega Assembly, was a card that he brought up as a potential tipping point in the matchup as well.
Yeah, certainly the Omega Assembly can kind of give you a twofold attack against the Druid, where you both threaten the Hakar and also the 3/8, the Hecklebot coming out as well. So not only do you prevent them from duplicating their hand, but you can also threaten to pull the Elise out of the deck, in effect ending the infinite combo from the Druid.
Yes. Generally, once the Baleful Banker combo is activated, they are just going to be sat with an Elise in their deck and nothing else, which means if you can randomly generate a Hecklebot through a Mega Assembly, through Delivery Drone, whatever other means you can come about one from, means you are guaranteed to disrupt that combo from your opponent. But outside of the Hakar and N'Zoth nonsense, this was already a good matchup for the Druid, even before they gained the ability to go infinite with that Baleful Banker.
I mean, certainly Druid has quite a few ways to tackle it. If they can't quite figure out infinite in the end, they do have the ability to pressure out the Warrior as well. Yeah. So as we barely covered the late game scenarios for this matchup, the Druid quest is already done, and PNC able to innervate this Nourish out, go ahead and start drawing towards the combo. And card draw is quite important in this matchup, because as soon as PNC starts filling up the hand and gaining pressure, it's very difficult for Casie A to pressure the Druid enough to them having a smaller hand size, and then B going for Hakar later on, making sure that PNC can't overdraw the Bloods.
PNC here choosing to Wrath a 1/2, which might look a little bit unusual to some people. Do you agree with that?
Certainly he has the mana available just to cycle the cards, and I think that's basically his entire game plan, get through the deck as fast as possible. The Warrior doesn't play a lot of minions, so the Wrath, sure, why not? As long as it has a target, just throw it out there.
Seems right to me. So now PNC, wealth of options at his disposal. Nourish is, of course, the key card in the matchup, so PNC having already hit it is huge. You might have seen Casie, he was head down in his notes for a second. He saw the Innovate come out on turn 5 from PNC. He briefly glanced up at his screen and then grimaced when he saw that the Nourish was the play that came off the Innovate. Really is a big deal. That's kind of a passive win condition for the Warrior, is that you get to play a lot of game before they get to cast their Nourish. Like, the Nourish is just buried deep in the deck, and that way you can actually make some inroads into the matchup before Druid starts doing their really broken stuff. But if the Nourish happens, stuff like this happens to the Warrior, and they are in a very bad spot very quickly.
Yeah, and certainly using both Nourishes from PNC side means that when he ends up getting to that infinite setup, he won't have additional mana to work with. For example, if you're able to hold on to an Innervate throughout the entirety of the game, you're able to play at least duplicate the Innervates, play Oasis Surger every turn, as well as a Baleful Banker. So that really sets up a more pressure-heavy board state as well. But without it, PNC will be kind of limited in his options of how to approach those infinite boards.
I guess on the subject of the Banker combo for when we get there, obviously you duplicate the Banker shuffles in the Elise, and you loop that forever. But there has to be other cards in your hand that you want to duplicate as well, right? To have to be effective against Warrior. Like, what are some of those key cards that you're looking to duplicate?
Yeah, a staple of that is having Kun the Forgotten King, just so you gain an extra 10 armor that turn, and you put out a free 7/7. So that alone is adding a 7/7, a 5/5, and a 2/2 to the board state. Right. You can also do stuff like with Zephyrus for a little bit, and then you can actually banker the banker and take turns in between to go Zephyrus Tyrion or something like that.
Sure.
And then you've effectively slowed your shuffling rate, but you've also increased like your options throughout the turns and how you want to answer threats and put out threats of your own with Zephyrus.
Time waits for no one.
PNC here with some pretty middling options from the Discover. Just picks up a Power of the Wilds, which I think makes sense just in terms of generating board pressure.
Yeah, certainly PNC was looking for an additional Nourish or potentially just the Forgotten King to pressure out the rest of this game. But here actually deciding to utilize every mana that he has, which means the Crystal Merchant is not drawing for a turn. It looks a little strange because he hasn't found the second Nourish yet, right? So I think I value this Crystal Merchant drop pretty highly in this matchup.
Casie now does have the Weapons Project Harrison combination available to him, but the problem is that that is a very slow turn for Casie right now. Feels like he has to be slightly more defensive. Might look to pair that with a Shield Slam or something further down the line so he can gain a little bit of a tempo swing from it when he makes that play happen.
Certainly with the amount of board pressure mounting from PNC's side, the Harrison is a little bit slow, but for Casie, he does need to find the card draw, to find the Hakar, to find the Emperor, to find the Shield Slam, and on top of all of that, to have the available armor to use the Shield Slam on the Hakar. In essence, Casey's counter plan is to find the Hakar and get the multiple bloods in and catch PNC off guard. Very difficult to do when you're facing down a board state like this.
Again, it's where Nourish just becomes so crucial, because without the Nourish, the amount of pressure that PNC could have output per turn up until this point would have been much, much smaller.
Yeah, and even though the Baleful Banker Druid does cut a lot of the traditional threats, such as King Phaeorus or Chef Nomi, having Cenarius, having the Worthy Expeditions means that PNC has kind of mounted a very threatening board and even has the reload, despite not having a secondary Nourish to follow it up.
Shield Slam has been found. Does give Casie some options now with that Weapons Project for removal alongside the Harrison Jones. As you were mentioning, the Shield Slams are important in the matchup, though, for the Hakar timing.
It's quite awkward for Casie because the bear does happen of 7 health. He's not able to just Shield Slam it away and deal with
smack it as well.
Right. So in this case, it's definitely very awkward for him.
It takes a full clear over the Harrison. All right, I wasn't looking at this, but now that I do, it makes a lot of sense.
And so he forgoes an additional draw with the Harrison Jones, but he does relieve the entirety of the board pressure here. Actually, PNC, he does run the Baleful Banker Druid, but he also has the additional threat of King Phaeorus, so that's definitely a welcome draw from PNC as well.
Yeah. This is about as good as the deck gets in the in the Warrior matchup, I would argue. He has all the threats in there. Cenarius, King Phaeorus, Kun, of course. No way you're building your Druid deck without that card in it these days. But then does also have that infinite potential with the Baleful Banker.
And I definitely like the way that Casie set up this turn. At most, PNC will have just the 2 weapon charges left, and Casie is able to go for something like Brawl, Coin Harrison Jones. So definitely guarantees that the board will not be full, and he will have some semblance of board state with the Harrison Jones versus whatever is surviving from the Brawl.
Right. And because he's got himself slightly ahead on board as well, like if PNC takes a slow turn where he just removes and kind of develops a small board, then Casey's just perfectly happy to drop Harrison into that anyway. Kind of a win-win scenario for Casie with the way that he set this up. Like I said, I did not look at the Dynamatic Clear until Casie did it, but as soon as he did, it made all the sense in the world.
Yeah, pretty lackluster board state from PNC, but he definitely feels like he was forced to go for the King Phaeorus with the Cenarius in hand. He hasn't quite given up on the pressure plan here yet, and I don't think anyone blames him for that. It seems like if he's able just to push a little bit more to Phaeorus, the Cenarius could be ending the game, and we don't end up going through this infinite combo thing that it eventually kind of leans towards as the game progresses.
Right. Halfway through the deck now for Casie. No Hakar found, no N'Zoth found. He's going to need to continue cycling over the coming turns. He does have both of those Omega Assemblies in hand and ready to rip as well, looking for those Hecklebot outs for later in the game.
Yeah, for PNC, he's going to go for the full pressure line, committing to the scenarios follow-up, saying, you know, Casie, that's one brawl down. Warpath isn't that amazing versus a sports state. If it's not the second brawl, or if it's not the one of Plague of Wrath, you know, we're going to push pretty far ahead with the scenarios.
Right. So assembly first, potentially look for some small mechs that you can throw into this brawl as well. Oh, just going to rip it.
That's going to be both brawls down from Casie. PNC taking a quick note of that.
Ooh, 4-9 surviving it as well. Was there no merit to just throwing another small minion into that brawl that he's picked up off the assembly?
Well, the chances didn't look that bad for Casie, right? He had his own Harrison Jones. I think the 4/4s weren't that big of a problem, given he does have the Warpath to follow that up later on.
Okay.
So he's really hoping it wasn't the 4/9, wasn't the 5/8. Odds didn't look that bad for Casie. I think, well, I mean, this 1/5 doesn't do a whole lot either, so maybe increasing the odds, there's
That's
definitely an
kind of my
for it.
argument, is like, what does this 1/5 do, right? Apart from increase your odds by 10% or whatever.
PNC picking up the second Nourish. We're fastly approaching the late game of this matchup already.
Yes, and you can see now yellow borders, Zephyrus active, Elise active. This means if Hakar does not start shuffling those bloods into the deck very, very soon, PNC is going to be able to set up his late game cycle as his deck approaches being empty.
Do you ever come to a point and say, I'm fairly far ahead at this point, I could at least a very solid hand, get 2 Zephyruses and pressure the warrior out from this point? Because it feels like PNC has just had a very, very strong start with the Feoris, with the Scenarios,
Right.
and at this point, Casey's having a very hard time just working towards stabilizing the board state.
Yeah, I think that is a very real consideration. I think with the level of pressure that PNC has had here, I think he might just be able to close this out before he hits fatigue and starts looping his Balefalls. Like, it feels like just Elise for 2 Zephyrus and some damage off those 2 Zephyrus is enough to end the game with how far ahead he is right now.
Unfortunately, though, for PNC, Zephyrus is on the far right side of the hand, and that does make a world's difference in terms of how Elise copies the hand texture, and it'll go from left to right. So you're going to be seeing copies of Swipe, copies of Lodi. If you can kind of move those out of your hands, out of your hand at the moment, then potentially we get to see 2 Zephyruses, but it's certainly not going to be this turn.
So with the Kun now drawn, I think this is the big indicator of where PNC's head is at in this matchup, because he can have a huge pressure turn right now with that Kun, but it would be kind of pushing all in against the one remaining mass removal from Casie, which is that 1 copy of Plague of Wrath.
Is it potentially lethal here if you go Kun, Swipe, and then play the 4-mana Kun from the Floop? You've dealt 8 damage, he has 7 health left. The Zephyrus will give you the Avenging Wrath.
Oh, wow, good spot. I love it. That sounds right to me. You Kun, you Swipe, you play the Flute Kun, your opponent is at 7, Zephyrus, Avenging Wrath. Yeah, great spot.
I'm upset, Subtle. Not because of PNC, this play was perfect, but
yeah.
I'm upset that we spent this entire game talking about these late game scenarios, and then the Druid just kills the warrior.
Welcome to casting, saying you plant 100 seeds and one of them might blossom someday. In this case, this was not it. We did not get to the late game Baleful Banker scenarios, but that was a very, very nice lethal spot by PNC and by my casting colleague as well. PNC gets himself over the line. Reminder once again, the loser of this series for the first time today is out of the tournament. No more third chances for these players. And I know Casie in particular, just based on what he's perceiving as a mistake in the first series, is going to feel pretty bad if he goes 0-2 from this position.
Yeah, and getting a win early with the Druid seems like a pretty big deal as well for PNC. He's more likely to play the Priest now. Casie does have Warrior to lead into that, but again, the Warrior only has 1 Plague of Wrath. It's slightly less tech for the Priest matchup, so I think PNC being comfortable on the Priest, likely to queue it up next. Casie's lineup overall, still decent, but kind of hard after the Warrior gets a win to find a good matchup against the Priest.
Yeah, I think the Warrior is still the go-to deck here. We can argue back and forth about the Priest matchup, as most people have been doing for the whole duration of Grandmasters. But I think it's that Warrior in particular that's like potentially forcing that Paladin out of the series. But I do think now for PNC, he is in a potentially incredibly strong position. Even though he didn't do it in the way we might have expected, he did pick up a much-needed win for that Druid. Plenty of action still left in this series, still plenty of action left in the day as well. Do not go anywhere, guys. Hearthstone Grandmasters Global Finals right after this.
BlizzCon 2019 is brought to you by Coca-Cola, the official refreshment of BlizzCon. Facebook Gaming, a world of play. Samsung SSD, performance gamers trust. Corsair, do your thing. And by NVIDIA.
My name is Francisco Laimontas and my nickname is PNC. I'm very excited about going to BlizzCon. It has been my dream since I started playing Hearthstone. And yeah, I've been working all my Hearthstone career for this, and I'm very happy that it finally happened. I started playing Hearthstone around 5 years ago. You know, I don't know, Hearthstone just everything looks like so beautiful, the art and everything, all that. And yeah, I also started signing up for tournaments, studying the game, watching a lot of streams, and learning how the game works. Like, I just wanted to win every game. You know, that's where it all started, I think, like the fire, you know. Well, my parents are like any other parent. They don't like it at the beginning, but then when they see that their kid being happy and just getting money, you know, earning some money, you know, like, they supported me all the way. They didn't tell me anything, but I don't know, like 6 months ago, I was using my mom's computer and I saw Hearthstone installed, so.
She didn't tell you?
She didn't say anything,
Oh,
no.
okay. Have you ever played a game with your mom?
No. Well, it didn't really hit me that I qualified for BlizzCon until like the day after, to be honest. I think it really hit me when I went to sleep after winning the tournament. I was like, oh man, I made it, you know. I was like in my bed just thinking about everything that happened today. I just couldn't believe it, honestly. So at BlizzCon, my goal, of course, is win the tournament. Like, I think everyone's goal is that. But most importantly, I just want to play well. You know, I don't want to look back at my games like 6 months later and say, "Oh man, I could have done this better or that better." You know, I don't want to look back on it and just be sad. You know, just want to be Casie or Fina. And you know, they're talking too much about me in the finals. You know, I don't like that. They have to win 3 matches before that, so I hope I can stop one of them on the way. Representing Latin America at Global Finals is a privilege for me to be the first one to get there. And I hope I can get the win for everyone. It's gonna be hard, but yeah, I think I can do it. Anything can happen.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. 2 players here Casie and PNC with their tournament lives on the line. 16 weeks of grinding throughout 2 Grandmasters seasons, all coming down to this moment here now on the BlizzCon stage, and it's Casie that's facing down the barrel right now as PNC was able to pick up a massively important win with his Druid in the opening of the series. And we were just talking in the break saying about just quite how important that is, because really the way you put it, with the way the series breaks down now, like PNC is just free to just play Priest and just until it wins at this point, essentially.
Right, I mean, it's expected that Casie would queue the Warrior up again, and at best that matchup's kind of a 50-50.
Right.
But as long as PNC sticks on the Priest, the remaining decks from Casie will be the Quest Shaman, favored for the Priest, or the Quest Druid, also favored for the Priest. So it's lining up. As long as PNC stays on the Priest, he looks to be in a good spot here.
Yeah, and I would suspect that the Druid from Casey's side is now unplayable in this series in his perspective, because if we look at the Grandmaster statistics, that matchup was something like a 75% matchup for the Priest throughout Hearthstone Grandmasters, which is kind of absurd. And we talked a lot about how bad the Shaman matchup was in Hearthstone Grandmasters, but it was better than that. So it feels like the Druid is the unplayable deck in this scenario, and that we will see we will see the Warrior versus Priest matchup coming out here. Then I think if Casie gets over the line with that Warrior, it's going to be the Shaman that he falls back on after that.
Right, and certainly from Casie, the Quest Shaman getting the tools of Desert Hare and Evolve, a lot can swing in his direction in that matchup as well now. So going into this game, from Casie, there is only 1 Plague of Wrath, and I remember Warriors being brought to GM actually teching in 2 Plague of Wraths in the time when Priest was extremely popular. But now Casie has lost one of his AoEs to deal with the Priest boards, but in the end, I believe Warrior running Double Weapons Project, running the Reckless Mummies and Brawls, having 2 Dynomatics even can kind of help the matchup a little bit as well.
Yeah, I will say like the Weapons Projects are valuable, but I think they also pair very nicely with Eternium Rovers that Casie doesn't have, because that curve is super powerful against Priest. If you can go Rover on 1, Weapons Project on 2, that's like a lot of board clear potential. And so I think the Weapons Projects get a little bit worse when you're not running the Eternium Rovers, but of course they are still great control tools on their own, because the Priest just really doesn't use the weapon effectively whatsoever, and you can just control the board, chip away at minions. Also great Shield Slam activators as well. But you know, in your experience, N'Zoth Warrior is kind of the big twist in terms of the matchup, is that there is the N'Zoth package. Like, is that relevant in the Priest matchup, the Kartuk Defenders and the eventual N'Zoth? Does the game ever come down to that kind of situation?
I mean, it's certainly too slow in this instance. And back then, when the Warrior was running the Tomb Wardens, the double 3/6 was actually a little bit better, because even though they were 8 drops, they were putting out 2 taunts, right? So it was a little bit weaker, or a little bit stronger against silence.
Yeah.
And PNC does happen to run 2 silences in his Priest deck, so it's always going to be a somewhat of a risk for Casie to play out the Kartuk Defender when he gets the opportunity to.
Full keep on this hand, I believe, from PNC. Thoughts, concerns?
Northshire Cleric seems like a keep.
Sure does. All right, moving on.
The Injured Blade Master, in a lot of matchups, it's a little bit slow, but it's actually one of the best res targets for Psycho Pop, so I don't mind that PNC is going this route. He kind of wants to build the beefy minions with the 4 attack from Injured Blade Master, so it does well in this matchup at least. And PNC now in kind of a bit of a spot, because just playing out Northshire Cleric on 1 oftentimes without a guaranteed card draw can be quite punished.
Right.
And especially because Weapons Project
Yes.
plus the Town Crier is able to deal with that. So he chooses to play it out on the safe side, play out the beaming sidekick, and make sure that nothing can really answer the Northshire on 1 here.
Yes, it's exactly the 1 drop into Weapons Project combination that I was talking about before. But you can see it is still possible with the Town Crier. Just having the Eternium Rovers as well increases your consistency. Eternium Rovers also open up some kind of interesting Shield Slam outs in the early game if those are in your deck as well. But that's a story for another time, because Casie here just has a couple of Town Criers to fall back on. But this is going to pick him up his first Restless Mummy now, which is potentially the best card in the matchup outside of Brawl.
Wow, and the 2 drop from PNC, this is absolutely the best draw he could have gotten going into turn 2. Able to value bump twice, and heal up both of his minions here, draw a few cards. Priest off to a very Priest start.
A very Priest start indeed, yes. Yeah, the shake of the head from Casie. Anki sees a downward spiral beginning now. PNC, on the other hand, overjoyed with the way this curve is working out. And rightly so. It's a hand he full kept. He should expect to have a very powerful curve.
I mean, potentially this is a little bit of hindsight, but given the fact that PNC had kept 4 cards, does Casie ever forego playing the Town Crier on 1?
I would still say no, because I think playing your 1-drop does open you up to those outs of, you know, finding your weapons project and so on to be able to contest. If you don't play a 1-drop and they play a cleric, that cleric just lives forever, right? Like, it's just there. So personally, I do always favor playing my 1-drop in the matchup, 100% so if it's Eternium Rover. But in this case as well, I think just getting the mana spent and drawing your Restless Mummy 2/3 of the time, even though Casie didn't there with the Ziliax, I still think it makes sense.
All right, but I mean, I'm just saying, like, in this spot...
You are just saying, you're right.
In this spot, I feel like if we didn't see the Town Crier come down on 1,
Yes.
we would have given Casie so much praise for it, because we know he did the 4-card keep.
Sure.
And it feels like it'd be right to give him the merit here. It feels a little counterintuitive, but it definitely feels like he would have been rewarded for holding on. But at the same time, he wouldn't have the Ziliax, the Reckless Mummy in hand.
Right. But so I guess diverting to a different talking point, I think playing around Restless Mummy was an incredibly obvious thing for PNC to do this turn. With 2 Town Criers played, your opponent guaranteed has a Restless Mummy in their hand. Do you think what he did was the most effective way of doing that on that turn? Because he had options with Divine Spirit and so on, right, to really get key minions out of range of those Restless Mummies?
And I think PNC could have played it pretty greedy as well. He could have bopped a 1-2 and the 2-3 in and healed and drawn 2 more cards with Northshire Cleric.
Sure.
Because now there's no minions for you to run your Northshire into and to draw cards with.
Right.
I definitely like drawing cards because in this Warrior matchup, it is a lot about attrition. PNC's line has the upside of potentially resurrecting the injured Blade Master from the Psycho Pop on curve.
Okay.
But I still like more cards.
Yeah, I'm inclined to agree with you. So PNC now knows that there is still 1 remaining Rush minion in hand minimum, either a Restless Mummy or Ziliax.
And I believe, again, going back to the history of GM, a lot of Warrior decks were cutting the Dynomatics because when it came down to turn 5, Priest always had more than 5 health worth a minion on the board. So Dynomatic here is kind of showing that same weakness where it might not be able to clear off the key targets. And if that's the case and there's a Northshire out on the board, in the end, PNC will just be able to gain more card draw as his minions will be equally damaged throughout.
Right. Shield block here, finds another off, it's a pretty big whiff. As Sam was saying earlier, likely to be much too slow to have an impact on proceedings. Divine Spirit already in hand for PNC. While Pyromancer pickup gives him some possibilities to do some explosive things in the coming turns with this Light Warden and this Northshire Cleric, but too expensive to make anything happen right now.
Right, and for Casie, the fact that PNC is not able to really heal anything here is quite a blessing. PNC probably just going to go for Psycho Pop on this board state. I'm not sure how much more he wants to push into it, but he certainly doesn't want to just leave like this board state stranded, right? Because this 3 damage is really not that much. You're giving the warrior too much time at that point. So I feel like you do need to commit a little bit more to the board state.
Yep, I agree. Especially with the knowledge that with the second Town Crier played, that there's still the threat of Restless Mummy #2 in hand right now. Although based on the previous turn, are you ever ruling Restless Mummy out? Was Restless Mummy just a play on the previous turn from Casie if that was his rush minion?
It's so hard to get reads on Casie because he plays out every turn so fast.
Yeah,
here,
yeah,
right? Was Restless Mummy good on the previous turn? I would say so, but potentially Casie could also be holding on to it and he wants to go for a brawl on the board state at the moment because he feels like it's just not recoverable and then play Restless Mummy afterwards, right?
Yep.
And we will note that the 6 mana 5/1 is a death rattle, so if we ever do get to the N'Zoth board state, N'Zoth does something proactive here as well.
Excellent note. PNC starting to look slightly frustrated with the way this hand is panning out, but potentially a problem with his own creation, as Sam was saying. chose not to draw a couple of extra cards earlier on a key turn. But now
It seems like the Northshire only really fulfilled about half of her potential here.
Sure.
I mean, that plus the fact that the Psychopomp kind of hit the low end of the roll. There was a 1-2 in the pool, as well as the injured Blade Master, and certainly the Blade Master here with Reborn would be no joke of a board state.
Right. Turn just a skip from PNC? Is he just going to be happy with the board state that he has?
Certainly you can't settle for this, right? It feels like it's the healthy minions are getting chipped apart, and the small minions will eventually die to Warpath. I like the Divine Spirit on the 3-8. It's at least threatening to survive through the majority of Casey's AoEs here.
Sure. There is that youthful Brewmaster for Casie, primarily intended for greedier matchups. Of course, with the Emperor discount coming back into the deck, Emperor Thaurissan rotating back in from Wild due to the Doom in the Tomb event means that Elysiana Youthful Brewmaster, N'Zoth Youthful Brewmaster, all of these things are possibilities now if you discount the right hand.
And Casie right now has no way of clearing the primary threat in the Light Warden. Just only really has the hopes of softening up the board state and letting the Light Warden eventually die to potentially what Casey's able to stick on board.
Got a lot of value out of this Spark Drill, though. Spark Drill has cleared out the Northshire Cleric, which is goal number 1 of any matchup against Priest. Just kill the Cleric. And those 2 1-1s actually picking up some reasonable value as well. Isolating the Light Warden on board now.
Yeah, and for PNC, he's able to use the weapon to punch into the Dynomatic and then go for something like Northshire with a circle. But he really wants to gain the full effect of the second Northshire, right? So
yes. He also has to start really respecting Ziliax at this point as well. I think several turns now, having not seen Restless Mummy be played, I think he might be well aware that that remaining rush minion is Ziliax, which means leaving mechs alive and in play is a scary prospect.
And it looks like it is going to be a draw turn here for PNC. This will be the first circle used in this game, I believe, so there is potential to pick up more spells. Potentially even a second circle with a Pyromancer here.
Sure. He has the ability to just bail out onto Nephset Ritualist as well, to draw 2 more cards at the end of this if he wants to. Which, if he's making that trade, looks like is going to be his line. Yep. Been a pervasive problem with PNC throughout Grandmasters, though, is that I don't know how much time he gave himself to react to those draws off the Circle of Healing and off the heals, because he took so long to act in the first place. And I think that has been, you know, TJ and Frodan, who have been the primary Americas casters, from what I have seen of their coverage of him, that has been their primary criticism of his play throughout the season, is that he does allow the rope to come in before taking actions a little bit too often. And I do have to raise the question of how did he even get to see what cards he was drawing before he made his play at the end of that turn?
Right, I mean, certainly the big takeaway, I think, from this turn is that that 13 damage didn't go face, right? And that's a big deal, because even if your opponent does have the Ziliax or the Dynomatic, he needs to swing the weapon at it as well, right? So suddenly it's just too much damage.
Yeah, it's a fair point.
From the Light Warden. So I'm pretty certain that 13 should have connected, and at this point that would have even threatened lethal, right, with the silence from the backswing from PNC side.
Right. Cleric survives here, though, with second Pyro in hand as well. Light Warden in play, Topsy-Turvy even can push extra damage through this card too.
Yeah, from PNC's side, I'm very reluctant to be throwing the Light Warden into this card 2 defender again. So potentially something like Pyromancer, Topsy-Turvy on the... Can we make a Topsy play here to get through the card 2?
Yeah,
it's
kind of what I've been looking at. It's pretty awkward.
We flipped the card 2, right?
You flip the card 2, yeah. Inner Fire is the same thing. It achieves the same effect by using an Inner Fire instead of Topsy-Turvy, which I guess is justifiable.
Just a fireball.
Just a fireball, yeah. 15 damage is a lot more than justifiable.
In the light's name.
PNC healing up the North Shard, but ending up throwing it away. I mean, this, it seems irrelevant, but I would like to see the Light Warden at full health here, just to make sure that Plague of Wrath doesn't end the game.
Right, yeah, that's a really good point. A double Warpath with Dynamatic here is a full clear, right? Yes, it is.
Yeah, the Light Warden's gone at this point.
5 health remaining on the Light Warden. Again, another reason, just the lack of health on this Light Warden. Allowing Casie to find the punish.
And N'Zoth actually able to bring out both of the Kartuk defenders. Even though only one has died, both of them have the Death Rattle effect. On top of that, the Spark Drill.
Spark Drill for removal as well, yeah.
I think Casie has managed to turn the corner here. PNC visibly frustrated. The Light Warden was basically the all-in at that point. It had already soaken up a Divine Spirit. We've also used, I believe, an Inner Fire as well. So the combo pieces for PNC to push the remainder of the damage aren't quite there anymore. Right. Despite the fact that he only has 8 cards left in the deck, so eventually, sooner than later, they will appear in his hand.
Hey, I got you, friend.
Zoth comes down, and that Spark Drill is going to come in super clutch here to be able to take care of that Armet. Armet has to go down here before you start addressing the board state. Can't even kill the 1/7 Reborn without it being Reborn with 7 health again if the Armet doesn't go down.
And PNC out of this 5-card hand, in order to win right now, he would have needed both Silences, the second Divine Spirit, and either the remaining Topsy-Turvy or the Inner Fire. So a calculated risk from Casie, just going to play the N'Zoth out here on turn 10.
Right. Also, I don't think he has any play that beats that hand anyway, right?
Oh, certainly not.
Yeah.
He could have gone with Boom Shield Slam to pull himself out of range potentially. So he'd be at 19.
Sure. So then it would be.
And that's like the
17
super safe line.
Yeah, okay. But then he just loses to. He doesn't need both silences. You just replace 2 silences with 1 extra arms, and it's lethal at that point as well.
Right.
So
I definitely like Casie going for this offline. But
yep.
War Golem.
War Golem in the house. Saying you said War Golem would win games earlier. This one does not look like it's winning games.
It could win a pre-smear.
Okay.
Up against an N'Zoth, I'm not quite so certain.
Fair enough. Looks like corner is very much turned here for Casie.
Bit of a nice life gain coming out from the Ziliax here.
Restless Mummy alongside off the draw. Casie essentially Renoing himself this turn.
You have been.
In the best kind of way, and Casie does square it up. That was looking very, very shaky for Casie through large periods of that early game and mid game. But I think we do have some questions about the way the PNC executed his game plan throughout that series. But despite that, he is still in a very comfortable spot in the series overall, I would say.
Yeah, I think it would have been a very nice relief for PNC to have won Priest versus Warrior, taking the 50-50 there. But going into the Game 3 of the series, PNC will likely just have a, I believe, 55-45 at best for the Priest versus the Shaman. So he's still sitting pretty here.
So I want to ask you, if you say 55-45 now, what was your opinion on the matchup before they had the bunny option?
You know, before that, I believe I put it down as 60-65, and Casper would always come to the calls and say, it's 25-75. Well, I've never seen anything really that skewed besides the Warrior versus the Priest. So it was pretty bad for the Shaman before. The Druid really hasn't gained too much throughout the expansion to really deal with the early combo damage from Priest.
Sure.
So it should be the Shaman deck coming out from Casie, and I will stand by it. It is just slightly Priest favored at this point with the card rotation.
I think he misunderstood. What Casper was saying is that Hunter Ace is 75% against everyone that's not Hunter Ace, regardless of matchup. But before we reach the conclusion of this series, we do have to have a quick word from our sponsors. So stand by, we'll be right back.
BlizzCon 2019 is brought to you by
T-Mobile. Their newest signal goes farther than ever, and it's built 5G ready.
MSI, True Gaming. Intel, the official CPU partner of BlizzCon. And by HyperX. We're all gamers.
Quick as a flash, just like that, we are back, and deciding game in this deciding series. One more time, loser of this series for the first time today is actually eliminated for the tournament. No more third chances for either of these players. And of course, in classic dramatic fashion, Hearthstone best scriptwriters in the business, it's going to come down to the final game of the series. Most likely, we haven't had confirmation of this yet, but we are expecting to see the Quest Shaman versus the Combo Priest for Casie and PNC respectively.
Yeah, I mean, the day has just kind of flown by here. Best of threes go by very fast, and I think we've seen some solid play, and one slip-up has actually just been catastrophic, I think, for Casey's instance. It's definitely affected his mentality throughout the day, and I'm definitely seeing a lot of emotion coming out from him as well going to the elimination match. But Casey getting a win with that Warrior must be very happy to turn that corner, and let's see how he does going into this game 3. I think he's kind of stabilized on his mentality here.
I think so too. We have had it confirmed it is going to be the Shaman versus the Priest, and I think Casey's reaction, Casey's show of emotion is a real good talking point, because I think in that series you saw immediately when he saw that the Waggle Pit get equipped and swing face, he realized what his mistake was immediately, and he even tweeted and said that he had the perfect hand read on his opponent. He'd written down on his notes that the hand was Waggle Pick and Leroy, or possibly a Shadow Step as the hand combination. So if you've done the hard part of developing that hand read, the easy part is don't fill the board when you have a life drinker in your hand. It's just sometimes you lose track of simple things like that in high pressure situations. And Casie, no one will have given Casie a harder time than Casie himself in that scenario. But I think, the road to redemption is an important one for Casie here to dig himself out of the spot that he got himself into.
Right, I mean, mistakes happen throughout the day, but at the end of the day, you still have another match to play.
Yes.
So let's redeem yourself right now, right?
In the light's name.
Job's done.
Light Warden start from PNC. Hand not as explosive as it could be, but still very, very solid. Casie, on the other hand, is going to try and get some value out of this Evil Totem, which is a pretty reasonable response to Light Warden, because again, with all characters in play currently uninjured, there is nothing to heal for Light Warden that can allow it to trade into this Evil Totem.
Yeah, and certainly Casie wants to fight a little bit earlier on the board with the lackeys. Something like Shoot Lackey or the Rush Lackey are very welcome here, just to chip a minion or two off of the board state.
How is it that you know Gilnean Royal Guard or wherever it was, but you still say Shoot Lackey and Rush Lackey?
Kobold Lackey and the one that goes double time, double pay.
Goblin Lackey.
Goblin, yeah. I mean, technically, ooh, Imp Gang Boss.
Hello. Imp Gang Boss, roster member of the Doom in the Tomb wild rotation. One of the least seen cards out of the rotated set, I would say. Warlock not really had the shine that some of the other classes have had in the format.
But certainly a very sticky card, allowing for Casie to kind of have some semblance of board in these early turns.
Yeah, for sure. One of the best 3-drops in the game, regardless of whether it's being played or not. One of the best 3-drops in history, some might argue.
And for PNC here, I'd like to see a play around MC Tech, because it's one of the ways that you lose in this spot.
Agreed.
But potentially, I mean, with Imp King Boss now dominating the board state, maybe you feel like you have to take a risk and play it out on curve.
Yeah, I think PNC's facial expression is kind of betraying that kind of feeling as well. If he underplays, then the Imp Gang Boss is just going to challenge all of his minions individually over the coming turns.
And does decide to go for the draw line. Actually able to pick up the Beaming Sidekick as well.
Casie gives the nod as he sees the Beaming Sidekick come down, though.
Job's
And MC Tech is active. It is coming out on curve. Taking the best
takes
minion.
the big one. The 3-4 changes sides. Casie says, welcome to the team. PNC in trouble.
And PNC not having the hand that really grabs tempo back in this spot. I mean, he does pick up silence, so he's able to deal with his Light Warden, which is now sitting on Casey's side of the board.
His Light Warden, yeah.
But I mean, this rest of the board state, it's still very difficult for PNC to pick apart.
Yep. I absolutely don't want to criticize that last turn because I personally have no idea what the play was on the previous turn. It was incredibly difficult because, you know, it's really just a flip on whether mind control tech is in hand, right? Like if you underdevelop there and there is no mind control tech and then the Imp Gang boss just starts farming you, like you're going to end up in a bad position either way, right?
I mean, certainly, I think this was all due to the boss himself, right? Like, what better 3-drop would be contesting the entire board of two Light Wardens and Northshire Clerics? So definitely PNC put in a precarious spot already by first Witchy Lackey.
You're in like injured Blade Master King Mukla territory at that point, right? to find a 3-drop that would do a better job than Imp Gang there.
And PNC playing out the Blade Master means that he's going to be giving up future draws from this Northshire Cleric.
Looks like the Northshire Cleric is getting buffed and trading as well. Yep, Cleric just going down on board here. Casie just has board clear available, and it's going to be a board clear that preserves his own minions. The swing has happened. I think Casie is firmly in control of this matchup from this turn onward.
Yeah, I don't really know if this line fighting for board worked out very well for PNC because the minions do trade out, and the priest having board is way more important than the shaman having board at this point in the game.
Agreed. Casie looking like he wants to go Faceless and Titanic here as opposed to the Sandstorm Elemental, which would be the full clear. The difference between full clear here is just an individual 1-1 on board, which is absolutely no big deal. This playing the 2 battle cries instead of 1 also has the added bonus of completing the quest.
Wow.
And PNC, with his tournament life, his BlizzCon life on the line, says that's enough. He taps out in quicker time than Cain Velasquez to Brock Lesnar, and he is going to be eliminated, unfortunately, from Group A here. Casie, after looking in dire straits in that series, is the one who's able to reverse the series and progress his way through the bracket.
I mean, it's definitely a tilting series. I can understand where PNC is coming from. MC Tech taking the biggest minion there. At the same time, we'll never know. We'll never know if there is a Pyromancer off the top, if he could reverse the board state, because certainly the Quest Shaman is fairly slow. It did have the board state there, and I can understand why PNC feels like at that point he has been defeated in that match.
Yep, I think in reality he had lost. I think that is a very reasonable ladder concession. It's just a matter of, do you want to torture yourself because of the stakes of playing that series out from that point? I think it's very understandable that your answer to that question is no. But we are here, of course, commiserations to PNC, but we are here primarily to celebrate winners. And that is the case now for Casie, who gets another bite of the cherry as he goes into tomorrow to take on Surrender, potentially get revenge, get ultimate redemption from that opening series, kind of reverse that mistake, undo the mess that he put himself into.
Yeah, and I think going into Group A, I had actually, when the day started, I definitely thought that Casie was going to be making it out through the winners round, and I thought potentially that Surrender would be on the lower bracket, but making out as well in the end.
And you see here, as we are about to get through to the Group B as well, which will be brought to you in a little bit by Gallon and Hunter Ace. You see that Tom 60229 and Bloody Face are the 2 players that are going to play off there in the elimination bracket to go through to that decider tomorrow against Fino, who lost just a little bit earlier to Lion, who has put in a phenomenal performance so far today. Lion herself finding herself on a kind of a Just Saying level win streak here, from what we're told, with a 7-0 record through to qualify for this event, and now continuing to win streak through up until this point. Have you been impressed with her play?
Yeah, she's definitely been a solid player, and you can tell she's comfortable on stage as well. I mean, I'm watching some of these games, some of these mulligans. She's laughing off the bad RNG. She's understanding when she's got the game in her hands as well. She seems comfortable on stage, and I mean, the win streak comes with that. And, you know, the confidence has been built up, and it's hard to take someone like that down at this point.
Absolutely is. Our groups have very nearly taken shape here. We just have one more match to resolve today. Gallon and Hunter Ace are going to be here for the Group B elimination match.
Is brought to you by Coca-Cola, the official refreshment of BlizzCon. Facebook Gaming, a world of play. Samsung SSD, performance gamers trust. Corsair, do your thing. And by NVIDIA,